Hey there. We're just going to talk a little bit about the Hex Editor. I'm just going to drag over this file here. This is Hex HD. This is a free software. Okay. Probably everything I am going to be showing you throughout these videos is free. I do in my previous videos use 3ds Max, but I will not be showing that at all. We'll be using only free software so that it has the most accessibility to everybody. So HexXD is free. You can download it, so you should go do that. So we dragged in the file here. You can obviously go and open it through the manual box here, find your file or whatever. But you can also just drag. I love dragging. It just makes it work quicker. However, if your system is running in administrator mode or has the UAC enabled, which is a safety feature, it might prevent you from dragging over files. Okay. Okay, so this is the Hex Editor. I'm just going to just explain how it works, and then we'll get into, I guess, some programming. So in Hex Editor, we're dealing with primarily the hexadecimal system, and so that means that we're often going to need to convert to decimal because most people are familiar with decimal and not with hexadecimal. But we use hexadecimal because it just looks better as a way of viewing the numbers on your computer. So over here on the right side, we have an interpreter. They call this an inspector. This is basically doing conversions from your data file to something that's more readable to a human. So in the decimal system, using numbers that you're familiar with. All right, over here, we're going to talk about what you're seeing on here. We have two views. This is being showed in hexadecimal. I don't know if I can highlight this, not really. Basically, this area here is hexadecimal, and then this area here is text. Okay, so text is interesting because they had to basically take a sequence of numbers and then have a letter in the alphabet represented by that number. And I believe Microsoft came up with that, but they forgot to include other languages, so it only included English. And then the rest of the world was like, computers are awesome. Sell us computers. Okay, cool. How do I get our language in there? And Microsoft said, oh, well, we don't know what language you use, so just make it yourself. Here you go. Here's how you can do it. And so code pages were born. A code page is basically when you install your Windows computer, it will ask you where do you live. You tell it your region, and then it sets that computer to represent the characters differently. So for example, the number 1 might represent the character A in English, but in a different language it might represent a whole different symbol. So 1 might mean something completely different. So this actually created a problem when transmitting text, especially from like a smartphone or something, from like one location to another location. If you sent an English text to somebody in Japan, they would not see English. Actually, no, that's a bad example. They actually do have English in there. I don't know another country. China. Let's say China. Let's say you sent English message to China. They would not see the message at all. Okay, because they don't have the English in their alphabet. Where I think Japan actually has English in their alphabet. So that might actually work actually. But anyway, basically the text changes. We get code pages. So if you go up to here, this hex editor gives you different code pages. Actually, not many of them. This is pretty sad, but these are supposed to change the encoding or decoding. Actually, this is pretty sad. This is the worst worst thing I've ever seen. But anyway, yeah. So I use a different hex editor normally, but I'll just show you mine that I use all the time. This is WinHex. I started using this when I was a kid, and I just kept using it. In WinHex, I can actually change to any one of these code pages that I want to. You know, just over here it has Islamic, Cyrillic, Turkish, Latin, Central Europe, Greek, Hebrew, Latin, Korean, Chinese, traditional Chinese, all this kind of stuff in here. Doesn't look like Hex XD has these options in here, but it doesn't matter. Text is special in the sense that depending on where you live, this will look different. Okay, but also when you're working with the data that's stored on your computer, sometimes they store messages in text, right? and you might be interested in intercepting that message. So sometimes they'll just store raw numbers, and these raw numbers might be, your bank account number or your birthday or something like that. But then you get into raw text, not raw text, but text that's encoded, where you might want to intercept that message. In this case, I'm pretty sure there's no text in here. It's probably a few areas here, and that's probably it. But yeah, okay. So that's what this is. Excuse me. I know that sounds a little bit complicated, but text was a really annoying thing that I still was learning about just recently, because they have multiple standards for encoding and decoding messages in text to different regions in the world. And just recently, in the last 10 years, there is a new standard called the Universal Text Format, UTF, I think is what it stands for. And then also another one called Unicode, which are two competing codecs that encode all of the characters in the entire world into one codec. Whereas Microsoft's solution was really bad, everybody just made their own. So we have everybody's own codec. But now I'm getting too focused in the text. Let's move on. Okay, so that's the text side. We're really not going to be looking at here much. You're going to just be aware of it. But unless you see something glaring at you, you're not going to be focusing on this. I see sometimes people will copy this and say, "This my model?" And they'll be looking on the text side, and I'll be like, "Yo, that doesn't mean anything," because, like I said, depending on how you change the encoding or decoder, this looks completely different. Which means when you're showing me a screenshot, this means completely nothing to me. So yeah, that means nothing. So you're not going to be looking over here unless you notice something glaring, like, oh, this says it's a PNG file. OMG! In fact, actually, it's a PNG file. You can see up here the file name. We'll talk about some of these patterns later, but yeah. So this is text. This is the hexadecimal side, and how this is going to help you find stuff is through this grid system. So you have over here is the address, the memory address, and this is the I guess this is also the memory address. So it's broken up in units of 10 or 16, sorry. So broken up in units of, well, I guess, yeah, 10 in hexadecimal. So we have units of 10 over here, and then across here we have 15. Yeah, that's 15. Yeah, the 16. 16. My bad. 0 starts with 0. 6. No, it's 15. I'm an idiot. It's 15. Yeah. Alright, so when I want to describe a location, and my cursor is right here, I can see that I'm at this side on the column on the left, I'm at address 0, and on the top, wait, that's the row, I'm an idiot. This row here says 0, okay, and that's going across, that's this row, and then this column says 0, so my cursor is here, I know that I'm at location 0, right? If I move the cursor down here, I know that I'm at 70. If I move the cursor over here, I just cross it. So I have 70 and then go up and I have 7. So the location is 77. Alright, that's the address of where my cursor is. So it's just like a grid system. It's really simple. Now if you didn't want to do the looking around, which I typically don't, at the bottom here you see it says offset 77. So wherever your cursor is clicked onto, it's going to tell you down here, so which is way more convenient than you having to look through the grid system. But the grid system here is traditional. You'll see this on like every hex editor. Okay, and on every hex editor it's the same. You're going to have your hexadecimal on the left and your text on the right. Very traditional. This is not so traditional, but it is very needed and required, which is an interpreter, which will then interpret whatever you're clicked on, wherever your cursor is. It's going to decode the information and tell it to you in English, so it's relatable. It's in decimal. So this is in hexadecimal, and this is going to be in decimal. So let's just go over a couple of these things that you're familiar with. Some of these you probably won't, but we'll cover that later on if we get to the next video. But over here we have the binary representation. Okay, so when I click on this, 89, it's in hexadecimal. So also in decimal, it's also 137, but also in binary, it is this. So if I just show you the calculator, this is the Windows 10 calculator, we're changed it into programmer, and I can type in the number 137. And so you can see in the calculator, it does all the conversions for you. So that number is represented by 89 in hexadecimal, which it is. That's what I clicked on. And it's also in binary. It's 10001001, which it is here. Okay, so let's close that. So this is basically what your interpreter is doing. It's just converting the numbers for you so that you can read them and understand them. Okay, so if this was a number representing, I don't know, your birthday or something, I would then see like the month or the year or something and be like, aha, that is what that is. Alright, so as we travel down here, I'll have to cover this a different topic, but the numbers are just raw numbers. They're just ones and zeros, and they can be encoded to store information in different ways. So all of these things down here is possible ways this binary representation could have been encoded to represent different information. So it's a little bit of a mindfuck, okay? Yeah, you can hide information in this number representation in any way. Basically, to find out the combination, it would just, I think it would be to the power of 2 to the power of whatever is in here, and that's how many possible combinations you can get. So it's pretty exponential to what you can store in that representation. And as you add more, which this file is filled with them, you get an unlimited amount of possibilities of things you can store in here. But these are common ones which are been standardized since the Windows platform had been developed and released. And so we'll be covering these primarily. You'll see some weird things in the wild, but these have been established for many, many of decades. So yeah, so there's pretty much standard, and you'll see these more commonly. Okay, I think that's enough for now, and we'll talk about the rest later, I guess.